Have you ever wondered how singers decide to warm up? What is the formula that they use? And what's the purpose of those silly little sirens that they do? In this video, we are going to break it all down. My goal is to give you the tools and knowledge that you need so that you can run with these ideas and create a warm-up routine that is effective and helpful for your specific voice. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Alicia Ann, a musician, singer, and vocal coach in the Washington, D.C. area. On this channel, we discuss good singers, how to be better singers, and general musician advice for aspiring professionals. Warming up the voice is arguably important and certainly necessary for building your voice. Whether you want to learn how to sing higher or achieve a more balanced sound, or in general, just have less bad days and a more consistent voice, you'll want to establish a good vocalizing routine. This video is going to be split into two parts. First, I'm going to share the overall outline or template or formula, whatever you want to call it, that vocal coaches use when coming up with their own vocalizing routines. And then in the second part, I'm going to share a few practical tips and guidelines for coming up with your own routine that you can stick to. The template will be available for PDF download in the description below. Before we begin, I just want to note a couple things. This formula is geared toward individual singers, not groups of singers. If you're in a choir, the warm-up routine will look very different from this because the goals and outcome are different from a solo singer. And number two, hopefully this goes without saying, but this is not the end-all be-all of warm-up routines. There are infinite ways to warm up your voice, and not everyone is going to use this template that I'm going to share with you today. And this is the broader reason of why I'm not going to share my exact warm-up routine that I use for my voice, because we all have different voices, and what works for me is not going to work for you. There's no quick fix or secret formula, just general guidelines that seem to work for the majority of people. The concepts remain true, and that is what I'm going to share with you today. With all of that out of the way, let's get straight into it. The first category in our warm-up routine is called the semi-occluded warm-up. Because the mouth is partially closed, this reflects some of the excited energy back into the vocal folds, which creates a back pressure that makes it easier for them to vibrate. I had a teacher explain to me one time that doing a semi-occluded warm-up resets the voice in a way that forces you to sing healthy. So no matter if you were screaming or yelling or talking loudly in a very unhealthy placement, it will reset everything so that you are now in a more healthy place to begin singing. Another teacher told me that certain kinds of semi-occluded warm-ups are used by speech therapists and ENT doctors to give the vocal folds a sort of massage. So all of that to say that these are very, very good for your voice and a great place to start when you're warming up. Here are some examples of this kind of warm-up. We have lip trills, raspberries, and singing through a straw. Now, how come we don't use the same kind of semi-occluded warm-up all the time? Well, that would be pretty boring, but aside from that, there is a bigger reason. No warm-up is perfect, and if you get really technical here, each different kind provides a different kind of tension within the vocal tract. They do have their own strengths and weaknesses, so by alternating what you do, you're basically covering your bases. Next up, we have the top to bottom warm-up. With these, it's pretty self-explanatory. You start at a higher note and then you descend lower. The point of these is to blend your head voice down into your chest voice. Basically, the muscles that are engaged when you're singing in your head voice are brought to lower notes, which will strengthen those set of muscles. It's like you're doing reps at the gym, and as you descend to lower and lower and lower notes, you're adding more weight to strengthen the muscles. It's also training your head voice to be more disciplined, which gives you more colors and textures and different vocal qualities that you can use in many different ranges, which makes your voice more versatile. The examples of descending exercises are virtually endless. It's literally just any pattern of notes that start on a higher note and descend lower. This could be a scale or a 5-note pattern or a chord or a triad, descending thirds. or pretty much any other creative descent that you can think of. I personally tend to stick with the 5-note pattern because I find this to be the sweet spot in any person's voice for providing enough challenge, but not changing too much so that you start creating other problems as you descend lower. What we're after with vocal training is challenging but attainable, and the 5-note pattern, in my experience, is what achieves that. Conversely, the third warm-up is bottom to top. As you probably guessed, the purpose of this is the exact opposite of our last warm-up. You want to blend the chest voice upward to strengthen that relationship. The reason is the same, it's like lifting weights in the gym. However, this one should come with a huge warning sign. Stretching your chest voice upward can cause a lot of vocal damage if not done correctly. This can be a whole separate video in and of itself, so I'm just gonna leave you with one main concept to think about today. The biggest mistake that young singers make is to bring too much weight from the chest voice into the higher register. The chest voice by nature is heavier than the head voice. So if you feel like you're shout singing, this is a good indication that you probably need to lighten up the chest voice so that you don't do vocal damage in the long run. One last thing to keep in mind with these last two warm-ups, the top to bottom and bottom to top, is that they are very interchangeable. It'll largely depend on what genre you're singing, what style you're going for, your voice type, and generally just where you are on your singing journey and what you need to be focusing on. There's so many variables that go into which one you would want to start with, more than we have time to get into in this video, but stay tuned for future videos and I will cover it. Wayne went to Wales to watch walruses. But if Pickford's Packers packed a packet of crisps, would the packet of crisps that Pickford's Packers packed survive for 2.5 years? Chances are you have probably heard that tongue twisters are great for vocal warm-ups. There's a good reason for this. They get the mouth moving and wake up the articulators. The articulators are the tongue, teeth, lips, and jaw. You don't want to neglect warming up this part of you because it really affects your diction. And if you remember in my previous video where I talked about what makes a good singer, diction is really important to how we perceive what good and bad singers are. Again, there are endless examples that we could talk about here because the English language is so vast. A quick Google search can help you get started in the right direction, and then you can just decide if you want to set these to music or just speak them. Last but not least, we have a variant warm-up. This is what transitions you out of vocal building into your repertoire. Now this one is very subjective because it can last for 10 seconds or 30 minutes. And there are two purposes behind this one. It is goal specific, which means that you're tackling an issue that you specifically want to get better at, whether that is learning to sing higher or chiaroscuro, which is balancing the bright and the dark in your sound. It also acts as a very important transition. It's a key part of the bridge that will set you up for success with whatever song that you're singing that day. For example, if you're going to be singing an upbeat country song, then you might want to do a transition warm-up that gets you in a nasally placement. If you think about it, this might be the most important warm-up that you do for the day. This is what determines if your performance is going to accurately represent who you are as a performer, or if it's just going to be another bad day because you didn't have the chance to fully get, both mentally and vocally, into the place that you need to be to perform at your best. The transition warm-up is what gives you the best shot. Don't neglect it. So that covers it for the outline. Each time you warm up, you'll want to do a semi-occluded, top to bottom, bottom to top, articulation, and variant or transitional warm-up. That sounds like a lot to remember, doesn't it? How do you even know where to start when you're like trying to figure out what to do for that day? That brings me to my first tip. Create a warm-up bank. This choose your own adventure format really reduces friction to getting started. Once you have a decent list for each category, you won't have to think about your warm-up routine every time. It's like creating a multiple choice quiz for yourself where all of the choices are correct. It makes life so easy. If you don't have a pre-existing list, then your multiple choice quiz now turns into a fill-in-the-blank quiz where some of the answers you choose might be wrong. Save future you the trouble, create your categories and lists now, and then just circle the ones that you're going to do for that day. Next, you might want to think about tracking. I know this probably sounds like super type A personality stuff, but even just tracking for 1 or 2 weeks can give you really valuable data on what is working for you and what is not. If you're a Notion user, it's super easy to add this to your practice log using tags, and then filtering these when you want to see patterns in the data. If you're more old school, then just writing these with paper and pencil does the trick too. And one last thing I wanted to mention, don't be afraid to change up the length of your vocalizes. I mean this both in reps per exercise and the overall length of time. Doing the same 45-minute warm-up over and over for the end of time would be very mundane and would eventually stop yielding the results that you want. That's why, for me, the reason that I'm doing warm-ups changes too. Sometimes the purpose is to build. Sometimes the purpose is to maintain. Give yourself the grace to switch between these two modes and know that in the long run, they're both helping you. I could keep talking about this stuff for days, but I'll go ahead and wrap up here. I hope that you found something useful in this video. Remember, there is a PDF download linked below if that interests you as well. Let me know what you want to see next. What other questions about singing do you have? Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.